Hello and welcome to the launch of our 2026 Australian EVP Index. I'm Malcolm Peake from Peake Corporate Solutions, and what I'd like to share with you today is some of what our research is telling us about the messages employers are taking to the Australian employment market, where there's genuine differentiation and where organisations are increasingly starting to sound the same. Importantly, we'll look at what employers can do to build a more credible and distinctive EVP. We'll begin with the purpose and scope of the index, before looking at the extent to which EVP messaging has become commoditised. We'll then move through the cross-sector results, examine how messages have changed between 2023 and 2026, and look specifically at diversity and inclusion, then finish with practical recommendations for becoming a first-choice employer. The common thread throughout the presentation is differentiation, what actually helps an organisation stand apart in a very crowded employment market. The index benchmarks the external EVP messages of more than 250 organisations across 16 sectors, drawing on research undertaken between 2023 and 2026. We assess the market through 7 EVP lenses, which can be summarised as pay, work-life balance, career growth, purpose, future skills, benefits and culture. The objective was not simply to identify which sectors say the most, it was to understand where the messages are strong, where they are weak, and where an organisation might find credible opportunities to differentiate. The first major finding is that EVP messaging has become highly commoditised. Between 90 and 95% of organisations promote both growth and purpose, while between 85 and 90% promote flexibility. Across all organisations, more than 80% communicated all three of these themes of growth, purpose and flexibility at the same time. While they're all important employee attributes, the problem is they no longer provide much differentiation. If almost every employer promises growth, purpose and flexibility, candidates are given very little understanding on why they should choose one organisation over another. The implication is that differentiation must come from attributes that are specific, credible and evidenced by the actual experience of employees. Having looked across the sectors, we can now step back and consider how EVP messaging has evolved between 2023 and 2026. The important question is whether employer messaging is keeping pace with changes in work, changes in skills, and employee expectations. Growth and purpose remain almost universal, appearing in the messaging of more than 90% of organisations. Flexibility is promoted by more than 85%, while more than 80% communicate at least 3 EVP elements simultaneously. Future skills messaging is growing. It increased from 14% in 2025 to 25% in 2026. That's a meaningful movement, but it also means that only 1/4 of the organisations researched are clearly discussing the capabilities people will need for the future. At a time of rapid AI and digital change, that remains a significant gap. This brings us to what we've called the EVP gap. Many organisations continue to lead with comfort-oriented messages such as stability, flexibility and belonging. These remain valuable, but the messaging often says much less about performance expectations, accountability, skills renewal, and digital readiness. Purpose also remains frequently asserted rather than clearly defined or evidenced. The risk is that external employment messaging fails to reflect the scale of change occurring inside organisations. Candidates hear reassurance but do not necessarily hear how their work, skills, and career will evolve. Another important area in which the market has changed is diversity and inclusion. D&I, as it's known, is now a familiar component of employer communication, but familiarity has also made generic claims less effective. 85% of the organisations we researched refer to diversity and inclusion, and 72% use language such as inclusive culture. However, fewer than 15% provided meaningful supporting evidence, such as targets, promotion rates, or pay equity data. The key conclusion that can be drawn is that D&I has become a baseline expectation rather than a differentiator. What can still differentiate an employer is evidence, transparent outcomes, measurable commitments, and a clear explanation of what inclusion looks like in practice. So what does all of this mean for an organisation that wants to become a first choice employer? The answer is not to add more generic claims. It is to become more specific, more transparent, and more selective. Our research points to 5 characteristics of stronger first-choice employers. First, they name the capabilities they are building, particularly in areas such as AI, data, and digital skills. Second, they evidence work-life balance by explaining actual flexibility, actual workloads, and lifestyle patterns. Third, they make career growth tangible through pathways, timeframes, and internal mobility opportunities. Fourth, they are honest about the work environment, expectations, and trade-offs. Finally, they provide evidence. This might include promotion rates, investment in training, or measurable diversity outcomes. This specificity enables an EVP to act as both a magnet and a sieve. It attracts candidates who are aligned with the organisation while helping people who may not be a good fit to make a more informed choice. There are 3 practical actions organisations can take. The first is to differentiate. Identify the employment attributes that are genuinely distinctive rather than repeating themes already owned by the rest of the market. The second is to align and build. Connect the EVP with the competencies and workforce capabilities the organisation will actually need. The third is to evidence the promise. Use transparent information to establish credibility and balance attraction with selectivity. A strong EVP is therefore not simply a communication exercise. It connects business strategy, workforce capability, and the real employee experience. To summarise the research, EVP messaging is highly commoditized across all 16 sectors. Between 90 and 95% of organizations promote growth and purpose. Future skills messaging is increasing from 14% in 2025 to 25% in 2026, but it remains underdeveloped. Diversity and inclusion is now a baseline expectation rather than a differentiator, and technology and energy and utilities are emerging as important leaders because they are beginning to connect employment with digital transformation, future capabilities, and more specific purpose narratives. My final message is that EVP should not be designed to attract everyone. The most effective propositions attract the right people by being clear about what the organisation offers, what it expects, and what makes the employment experience genuinely different. That requires a deep understanding of the current workforce, the capabilities the organisation will need, and the expectations of its target talent. Generic language blends into the market. Specificity, evidence, and honest storytelling create trust. A strong EVP works as both magnet and sieve, bringing aligned people towards the organisation while allowing others to recognise that the fit may not be right for them. Thank you for joining us to hear about the 2026 results of our Australian EVP Index. We hope the results have provided a useful benchmark for examining your own organisation's employment messages and identifying where greater differentiation may be possible for you. We welcome your questions, and you can also contact Peak Corporate Solutions for sector-specific reviews, EVP benchmarking support, or to have a deeper discussion about building a more distinctive and evidence-based proposition.